My wife left for a month with the hot new neighbor. I filed for divorce. She tried to fix it, but I'm not a backup. I guess I'm writing this to get it out of my system. My name is Mike. I'm 31 and until lately, I felt I had my life under control. I've always been a simple guy. No big dreams, no crazy drama. I had a regular career as a software developer, a decent house in a quiet neighborhood, and, until recently, I believed I had a strong marriage with a woman I truly loved. Laura and I met almost 8 years ago. Looking back, it seems like a lifetime ago. I was 23, fresh out of college, working my first job, and frankly, naive about life. She was 22, working as an assistant at a marketing agency while trying to figure out her own career path. For the record, she never did and eventually became a stay-at-home wife. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue, one of those casual backyard gatherings when everyone is using cheap paper plates and someone is always burning the burgers. She approached me and made a snarky jest about how I appeared to be planning my escape. I can't recall my response, but she laughed, and we ended up talking for the rest of the evening. From then, everything went quickly. We started dating, and it felt like she gave some excitement to my otherwise mundane and routine life. Laura was adventurous and spontaneous, always planning last-minute road trips or bringing me to a new restaurant she had heard about. Meanwhile, I remained the grounded one. I'd be the one to figure out the budget, check the weather, and double-check the gas tank before we hit the road. It seems to work. We balance each other out. She brought excitement into my life, and I offered her the steadiness she stated she lacked in previous relationships. After 3 years of dating, we decided to get married. The wedding was intimate, with only relatives and close friends. We didn't come from wealthy households, so there was no grand ballroom or extravagant catering, but that didn't matter. After the wedding, we began to establish a life together. We purchased a little 2-bedroom house in a quiet suburb, not the fanciest location, but it had potential. For the most part, things seemed stable. When I got home from work, Laura was generally in the kitchen or on the couch, browsing through her phone. She would tell me stories from her day. She worked in marketing at the time, so there was always some drama with clients or coworkers, and I listened. This was our dynamic. She was the storyteller, and I was the listener. We did not have children, but it was a joint decision. Laura wasn't in a rush, and neither was I. We both preferred to wait until we were more financially stable and prepared for the next major step. We seemed to agree on the majority of issues. Looking back, I wonder if I became too comfortable. It's easy to get into a pattern, especially when life feels stable. I would get up, go to work, return home, and repeat. Of course, we had date nights, which usually consisted of supper at one of our favorite restaurants or a movie. But I believe I stopped noticing the small details, like how Laura seemed to thrive on attention. It wasn't too horrible, at least not at first. She's the type of person that can brighten a room, and people instinctively draw towards her. I guess I began to take her vitality and warmth for granted, expecting they were a continuous part of our lives together. At the moment, I wasn't concerned. I assumed we were solid. Sure, we had disagreements now and then, what marriage doesn't? Most of the time, it was about little matters, such as me forgetting to take out the garbage or her leaving her shoes scattered throughout the home. Nothing significant. But there's this issue about relationships. They can appear fine on the outside while cracks occur quietly underneath. If you don't pay attention, those cracks might expand and cause the entire foundation to crumble. I didn't see it coming, at least not then. I thought we were constructing something robust and long-lasting. But sometimes life has a way of proving you incorrect. Jake, a new character, entered our lives. Jake moved in next door when his former neighbors, an elderly couple, downsized and relocated to Florida. He was roughly 28 years old at the time, making him younger than the majority of the residents in the neighborhood. He was a personal trainer, fit, confident, and admittedly a little too attractive for his own good. He had the type of body that made people look twice, as if he had just stepped out of an action film. Jake was easy to notice from the moment he moved in. Not just because of his appearance, but because he was always outside doing something, washing his car, mowing the lawn, erecting a pull-up bar in his yard. There was always a reason for him to go shirtless. He quickly became the buzz of the neighborhood. Laura spotted him right away. How could she not? We first met Jake when he came over to introduce himself while we were in the yard one Saturday morning. He was pleasant, the type of person who could charm anyone. Laura started up a discussion with him almost immediately, asking where he was from, what he did for a living, and how he liked the neighborhood. I recall standing there, smiling and nodding, barely able to say anything while the two of them chatted like old friends. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Laura was outgoing. She spoke to everyone. She'd be just as chatty with the mailman or the guy at the hardware store. It never seemed to me that there was anything unusual about her interest in Jake. But, looking back, I can see the subtle alterations that occurred after that. It started with casual talks. Laura always found a cause to join Jake outside. At first, it was small tasks like getting the mail, watering the plants, and putting out the trash. However, these brief jobs invariably led to 10 or 15-minute conversations with Jake. I once arrived home from work and discovered them conversing in the driveway. Laura was holding a basket of laundry that she had been carrying to the garage, and Jake was lounging casually against his car, laughing at something she said. When I stepped up, they both turned to me, and Laura pretended it was no big deal. Jake was just telling me about his new gym equipment, she explained casually. It did not stop there. A few weeks later, Laura decided to bake cookies, which she hadn't done in months. I didn't think much of it until I noticed her heading across the yard, a dish of cookies in hand. Just being neighborly, she remarked when I asked her about it. I shrugged it off. Laura's behavior in this regard was not unique. She had previously brought brownies to other neighbors. But then there was the time she purchased a new set of training clothes. Bright, fitted leggings and a matching top, which was not something she would ordinarily wear. When I asked her about it, she said she was thinking about starting to jog again. You know, to get back into shape, she explained. I did not question it. Laura had previously gone through fitness phases in which she would become thrilled about working out for a month or two before losing interest. But this time, her timing was ideal. Jake jogged virtually every morning. I'd see him out there, headphones in, doing laps around the street. Laura determined her new jogging program would begin at the same time Jake was out there. I noticed them speaking on the sidewalk one morning as I was going for work. Laura was stretching, and Jake was showing her a way to avoid shin splints. I didn't say anything, just a short wave and drove away. But something in the scene stuck with me. Around this time, I saw Laura's phone habits change as well. She'd always been on her phone, reading around social media and contacting her buddies. But now she appeared wary. When I stepped into the room, she would swiftly lock her screen or flip her phone over, as if she didn't want me to see anything. One night, I observed her scrolling through Instagram, and when I looked over, I saw Jake's name at the top. She hastily swiped past it, but I saw enough to know she was looking at his profile. When I asked her about it, she brushed it aside. I was just checking out his fitness posts, she told me. He has some good workout advice. I wanted to believe her, so I let it go. But the small things kept stacking up. Another day, I was working in the garage and heard laughter coming from the backyard. I stepped outside to see Laura and Jake standing near the fence, laughing about something. Laura was holding an iced tea, and Jake was waving animatedly while telling a story. Laura waved at me as if nothing unusual had occurred. Jake was just telling me about this funny thing that happened at his gym, she explained later when I questioned about it. It was beginning to feel uncomfortable. I don't want to sound paranoid, but you can know when something is wrong. Laura's conversation about Jake had a new energy to it. She'd casually mention things he'd said or done, such as Jake's thinking about getting a dog, or Jake recommended this great protein shake. It wasn't what she was saying, but how she said it. Then there were the glances. You know what I mean. When we went outside and Jake was nearby, I noticed Laura take small glances in his direction. It was subtle, but once you notice it, you can't ignore it. At this moment I had yet to say anything. Part of me refused to think there was anything to worry about. Laura was someone I trusted. We had been together for years, and I thought we had a good relationship. But another part of me, the one that couldn't ignore the pattern, began to question. I chose to be quiet for now, but I began to pay closer attention. If something was happening, I had to witness it for myself. It was a Saturday morning, and I remember it vividly because it began off so typical. I got up early, as I always do, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, browsing through the news on my phone. Laura was still in bed, which was not surprising. She enjoyed her slow mornings, particularly on weekends. The house was silent, with only the humming of the coffee machine in the background, and for a brief minute, I felt peaceful. Funny how that works. You think everything is fine because you have no idea what's going to happen. Laura entered the kitchen around an hour later. She was in her pajamas, her hair all tangled from sleeping, holding her phone in one hand and massaging her eyes with the other. She sat across from me at the table, and I could tell something was up right away. She exuded nervous energy, drumming her fingers on the table and gazing at her phone as if she were avoiding eye contact. "Are you okay?" I inquired, setting down my phone. She nodded hastily before shaking her head. "Actually, no," she responded with a big sigh. "We need to talk." Anyone who has been in a relationship understands that those 4 words rarely mean anything good. My stomach nodded, but I tried to keep it cool. All right, I murmured, reclining in my chair. What's going on? Laura paused, her gaze flitting around the room as if she was looking for the proper words. Finally, she looked at me and said, I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. I think I have feelings for Jake. For a moment, I believed I had misheard her. What? I asked, leaning forward as if being closer would make the words more clear. She bit her lip, appearing really uncomfortable. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said hurriedly, as if she wanted to avoid the response. It just happened. I've been spending time with Jake, and I feel this connection, and now I'm confused. Confused. That word struck me more than anything else. She did not just express her guilt or admit that she had made a mistake. She expressed her confusion, as if she was trying to solve a puzzle. I stared at her, trying to understand what she was saying. My thoughts raced. Did she mention she wanted to leave? Is she asking for a divorce? Was she trying to confess and move on? I couldn't tell, and that made things worse. So, what does this mean? I inquired finally. Are you saying you're done with us? Laura shook her head rapidly. No, not necessarily, she replied. I don't know what I want right now. I love you, Mike. I do, but I can't stop thinking about him, and I need to figure out what these feelings mean. I felt as if the floor had been torn out from beneath me. We'd been together for years, had established a life together, and now she said she wasn't sure she wanted to be with me anymore. It was surreal. I took a deep breath and tried to hold my voice steady. So, what are you saying? You want to take a break? She hesitated and then nodded. Kind of, she responded. I need time to figure things out. I was thinking maybe I could take a month to spend some time with Jake and see if there's something real there. If it doesn't work out, then we can focus on ourselves. I blinked, astounded by her audacity. You're serious? I asked, without even framing it as a question. Laura nodded, her gaze begging. I know it sounds crazy, but I don't want to throw away what we have without being sure. I don't want to live with regrets, you know? Regrets. The phrase lingered in my head like a splinter. She was talking about regrets as if she was the one putting everything on the line, as if my feelings were secondary to her life-changing decisions. I sat there, staring at her, a combination of rage and incredulity boiling beneath the surface. Part of me wanted to yell at her for being so selfish. But another part of me, perhaps the calmer, more calculated side, chose to remain silent and let her dig her own hole. All right, I murmured, reclining back in my chair. Laura blinked, apparently taken off guard. Wait, really? Sure, I replied, shrugging as if it were no great issue. If you think that's what you need, go ahead. Her look flickered, as if she didn't know whether I was being real or mocking. I just think it's the best way to figure out where my heart is, she admitted cautiously. Sure, I replied. Do what you need to do. Inside, I was already finished. When she mentioned she wanted to spend a month with another man, my brain flicked a switch. But I didn't want to show my cards yet. If she was willing to abandon our marriage for a dream with a neighbor, I was curious to see how far she would go. Laura let out a relieved sigh, as if she had just been given permission to accomplish something heroic. Thank you, she replied, reaching across the table to touch my hand. I know this is a lot to ask, but I really believe it's the right thing for us. I stood up and grabbed my coffee mug, pulling my hand away. Sure, I repeated, my voice flat. If that's what you need. She said nothing after that, simply sat there, most likely contemplating the fact that I wasn't arguing or fighting. But within, I was already planning. Laura spent the following few days packing a modest bag. She informed me she'd be staying with Jake, and she made it sound casual, as if it was simply a temporary arrangement. She didn't appear to realize that I wasn't asking inquiries or expressing any resistance. When Laura went, the house felt different. Not empty, but quieter, as if someone had turned down the volume on my life. I stood in the living room after she left, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, and stared at the door. I expected to feel angry or heartbroken, but all I felt was a peculiar peace, as if the weight of pretending everything was fine had finally been lifted. I strolled into the kitchen, poured myself a drink of water, and stood there, trying to figure out what had just happened. My wife, whom I had been with for years and expected to spend my life with, had departed to figure things out with the guy next door. If it hadn't been my life, I would have assumed it was some insane TV drama. The first several days felt odd. I started noticing the little things she'd left behind. Her favorite cup on the kitchen counter, a pair of shoes near the entrance, and a blanket thrown over the back of the couch. I considered relocating them, but ultimately chose to leave them where they were, not because I missed her, but because I didn't want to waste energy. I poured myself into work, taking on extra assignments to fill my schedule. I stayed late at work not because I had to, but because I didn't want to return home to an empty house. When I wasn't working, I went to the gym frequently. I had never been a regular gym goer before, but there was something fulfilling about pushing myself physically, as if I could sweat out all of my stress. Friends began to realize that something was amiss. A few of them inquired as to why Laura was not present, and I responded vaguely. "She's staying with a friend for a while," I explained, attempting to sound casual. I wasn't ready to dive into the real tale yet. My father was the only one I spoke the truth to. I contacted him a few days after Laura left, and the first thing he asked was, "What's wrong?" He's always been able to read me, even over the phone. When I informed him what had happened, there was a prolonged delay on the other end of the call. Then he added, "Well, son, I hate to say it, but it sounds like you're better off without her." At first, I wasn't sure what to reply. I anticipated him to be more furious or ask more questions. But then he said something that remained with me. "If she doesn't know your worth, why should you wait around for her to figure it out?" He was correct. I'd spent so much time trying to understand Laura's decision and find out where I went wrong that I hadn't considered what I deserved. I wasn't just a backup plan in case her affair with Jake didn't work out. That night, I sat in the darkened living room, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. We seemed so pleased in that image, so certain in our future. But now it simply felt like a reminder of all that had gone wrong. By the end of the week, I had made my decision. I was not going to sit around and wait for Laura to make her big decision. I was planning to make my own. The next day, I called a divorce attorney. Sitting in that lawyer's office felt weird. I detailed the scenario, attempting to maintain a steady voice, even though a part of me still couldn't believe it was true. The lawyer listened intently, nodding as I spoke, and when I finished, he replied, "You are well within your rights to file for divorce. This type of situation falls under irreconcilable differences." Hearing those words made things click in my head. Irreconcilable differences. This is what we would become. Laura and I weren't on the same page anymore, and perhaps we never had been. The lawyer guided me through the process, outlining what I needed to do and what I could expect. By the time I left his office, I had a strange sense of satisfaction, as if I had finally taken charge of my life. Back home, I began taking little efforts to prepare for the inevitable. I transferred some money to a second account in case things became ugly later. I walked through the house and began mentally partitioning what was mine and what was hers. I didn't touch her belongings yet. I figured I'd wait until things were official, but in my head, I was already planning how the house would look without her. The days stretched into weeks, and I grew accustomed to the stillness. It wasn't as horrible as I expected. In fact, it felt really tranquil. I didn't have to deal with Laura's continual chatter or the minor disagreements over trivial matters like whose turn it was to do the dishes. Meanwhile, I started hearing stuff through the grapevine. A neighbor reported seeing Laura and Jake at the park, looking cozy. Another person claimed to have seen them at a cafe downtown. I nodded and smiled, as if nothing bothered me, but inside I was filled with rage and pity. Anger because she had thrown away everything we owned for a fling with a boy who was unlikely to stick around. Pity, because I knew it wouldn't go well for her. Jake did not strike me as the sort to settle down, and Laura was about to find out the hard way. By the third week, I had stopped checking my phone for Laura's texts. I assumed if she wanted to communicate, she'd reach out, but I wasn't holding my breath. I was finished waiting for her. One night, while cleaning out the garage, I came upon a box of old photos from when Laura and I first met. For a brief period, I felt a stab of sadness as I remembered how happy we had been back then. But then I remembered all the subtle red signs I'd disregarded over the years, all the times I'd prioritized her demands over mine without even recognizing it. I closed and moved the box away. I didn't need those memories. Laura decided to make her spectacular reappearance almost exactly a month ago today. I had not heard anything from her during her brief trial with Jake. The few texts she sent were vague at best. "Hope you're doing okay," or "We'll chat when I get back." She didn't even try to keep me updated or pretend she was torn about her decision. It was as if she had already dismissed me as Plan B. By this point, I had ceased caring. I wasn't waiting by the door for her to come to her senses. I wasn't pacing the house, wondering what she and Jake were doing. I had filed for divorce, and my lawyer had already begun drafting the paperwork. As far as I was concerned, the marriage was ended. But I didn't tell her that just yet. When she went through the door, nothing seemed to have changed, at least for her. She had her bag draped over her shoulder, her hair nicely done, and a confident expression on her face, as if she'd just returned from a trip and was expecting me to roll out the red carpet. "Hey," she said, placing her luggage by the door. "I'm back." I was sitting on the couch, scrolling between channels and scarcely looking up. "Welcome back," I murmured, my tone remaining neutral. She paused, as if she was anticipating more of a response. When I didn't jump up or inquire how it went, she walked over and perched on the couch's arm. "We should talk," she stated quietly and carefully. I turned to face her and muted the TV. "All right," I replied, crossing my arms. "Talk." Laura smiled, the kind of smile she used when she was trying to make things better. "I've done a lot of thinking," she told me. "And I've realized some things. About myself. About us. About what I want." I simply nodded, waiting for her to continue. She took a big breath, as if she were ready to give an impassioned statement. "I care about you, Mike. I really do. And I think we can work through this. I think we can rebuild what we have." Rebuild. She stated it as if it were as simple as repairing a leaking faucet. I didn't say anything, simply looked at her, allowing her to fill the silence. She was perplexed by my silence, but she persisted. "Jake's a great guy," she remarked, and I had to bite my tongue to stop giggling at how casually she mentioned him. "But I realized he's not what I need. He's fun, sure, but he's immature. He doesn't have the stability that you have, and I think I was just caught up in the excitement of it all." There it was. Her big revelation. She tried out the shiny new toy and decided she liked the old one more. "Uh-huh," I replied, my voice cool. Laura blinked, as if she expected a more intense reply. "I know I've hurt you," she murmured, reaching out and touching my arm. "But I really believe we can get past this. We've been through so much together, Mike. We have history. That's not something you just throw away." I let her continue. I let her unload all of her perfectly practiced phrases about love, forgiveness, and beginning over. When she finished talking, I rose up and walked over to the kitchen counter. I unlocked a drawer, pulled out the divorce papers my lawyer had sent over, and placed them on the table in front of her. "What's this?" she inquired, her smile fading. "Divorce papers," I explained simply. Her face turned pallid. "You're kidding," she exclaimed, releasing a frightened laugh. "Nope," I replied, leaning against the counter, arms folded. "I'm not kidding." For a time, she stared at the papers, as if she couldn't believe what she saw. Then she glanced up at me with big eyes. "You're divorcing me?" "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not interested in being your second choice, Laura." Her face went from shock to angry in an instant. "Second choice?" she demanded. "That's not what this is." I was confused, Mike. I needed time to figure things out. "And in the process, you decided to test the waters with another man," I added calmly. "You left. You walked out on our marriage. And now you're back because it didn't work out with him. Do you honestly think I'm just going to take you back like nothing happened?" Laura opened her mouth to argue before closing it again, her face growing red. "It's not like that," she responded, her voice quivering. "I was trying to do the right thing. I didn't want to stay and resent you. I thought—" She trailed off, her gaze darting across the room. "You thought you could have it both ways," I said for her. She stood up and crossed her arms. "You're making a mistake, Mike. We can fix this." "I know we can." "No," I replied firmly. "We can't. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." She appeared to be about to cry, but I didn't let that affect me. I had already made up my mind. The remainder of the conversation was a haze. She tried to argue and guilt me into altering my mind. She discussed our history, our home, and even the possibility of starting a family someday. But nothing worked. Finally, she stormed out of the house. I stood there for a time, staring at the empty area where she had been, without feeling anything. No sadness, no regret, no second thoughts, only relief. Later that night, I called my lawyer to inform him that Laura had seen the paperwork. He said, "How'd she take it?" "Not great," I remarked, smirking. "Do you want to give her time to process, or should we move forward?" "Move forward," I instructed without hesitation. It wasn't easy standing up to Laura, but it was ultimately the correct thing to do. She viewed me as a backup plan in case her fling didn't work out. And if she believed I'd take it, she obviously didn't know me as well as she imagined. I knew she would not give up easily. Laura was not the sort to simply walk away from a confrontation, especially one in which she thought she was losing. I'd hardly sat down when my phone buzzed with a text from her. "This isn't over." I gazed at the message for a second before locking my phone and throwing it on the couch. She was correct. It was not over. Not yet. But it would happen soon enough. The following several days were eventful, to say the least. Laura arrived unannounced the next evening, beating on the door as if she were attempting to break it down. "Mike, open the door," she exclaimed. I opened it, keeping a bland attitude. "What do you want, Laura?" She rushed by me and stormed into the living room, as if she still lived there. "We need to talk," she stated, pacing back and forth. "You can't just file for divorce without giving me a chance to fix things." I leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms. "You had your chance," I replied quietly. "You made your decision when you left." "That's not fair," she responded, her voice rising. "I didn't leave to end our marriage. I left to figure things out, to make sure I wasn't making a mistake by staying." I could not help but laugh dryly. "And in doing that, you proved you didn't value what we had. You don't test a marriage by running off to someone else, Laura. That's not how it works." She paused pacing and turned to face me, her eyes blazing with frustration. "I was confused," she remarked, her voice shaking. "I didn't know what I wanted, but I know now. I want us, Mike. I want to fix this." "Too late," I replied, my tone strong. "You don't get to come back now just because things didn't work out with Jake." Her face contorted in rage, and she aimed a finger at me. "You're being petty," she said. "You're throwing away everything we built over one mistake." I shook my head, maintaining my composure. "It wasn't just one mistake, Laura. It was a series of choices. You chose to flirt with Jake. You chose to prioritize your feelings for him over our marriage. And then you chose to leave. Those weren't accidents, they were decisions." She opened her lips to argue, but then stopped, her shoulders sagging. For the first time, she appeared defeated. "What am I supposed to do now?" she inquired quietly. I sighed, feeling pity for her, despite everything she had done. "That's not my problem anymore," I explained. "You made your choices. Now you have to live with them." She waited for another minute, looking as if she wanted to say anything else, but then she walked out without saying anything. Following that, the divorce proceedings went fast. Laura attempted to drag things out at first, perhaps expecting I would change my mind. She even tried to play the victim in front of our mutual acquaintances, accusing me of being cold and cruel. My father, on the other hand, was completely on my side. When I told him about the scenario, he let out a low whistle. "She's got some nerve," he commented. "But I'm proud of you, son. Standing your ground isn't easy, but it's the right thing to do." Laura's stalling tactics proved ineffective. My lawyer was sharp, and the proof of her leaving for Jake made things quite clear. She attempted to plead for spousal support, stating she had given up her profession for the marriage, but the judge did not buy it. Finally, we reached a reasonable deal. She received a modest sum of money and some of the furniture she'd chosen, but I kept the house and the most of my savings. It was not ideal, but it was better than I had anticipated. The final hearing was bittersweet. Sitting in that courtroom, signing the documents that would officially end our marriage, felt strange. I glanced across at Laura a few times. She appeared exhausted, as if she hadn't slept in days. Her lawyer handed her a pen, and for a brief minute, I assumed she was not going to sign. But eventually, she scribbled her name at the bottom of the sheet, completing the transaction. Following the hearing, she approached me in the hallway. "Mike," she spoke softly, just above a whisper. "I'm sorry for everything." I stared at her, hoping to recognize the person I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, but all I saw was someone I used to know. "I know you are," I replied. "But sorry doesn't fix this." Her eyes welled up with tears, and she reached out to hug me, but I pulled aside. "Take care of yourself, Laura," I whispered, starting to walk away. I'd occasionally hear tidbits about Laura through the grapevine. Jake obviously moved on to someone else shortly after she returned to me. According to one common friend, she was currently living with a relative and figuring out her next moves. I didn't feel satisfied hearing about her problems, but I also didn't feel sorry for her. She had made her decisions, and now she was dealing with the consequences. One day, I ran into her at the supermarket. We locked eyes briefly, and I could see remorse written all over her face. She gave me a little hesitant wave, but I simply nodded and moved past. There was nothing more to say. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled situations. Laura believed she could have it both ways. She could go, pursue her feelings for someone else, then return to me if it didn't work out. But life does not operate that way. I've learned a lot about myself along this process. I realize now that I deserve someone who cherishes me and does not consider me as a last resort. And if that individual is out there, fantastic. If not, that's okay too. For the time being, my primary goal is to reconstruct my life on my own terms. Laura's trial run with Jake may have been her way of gaining clarity, but it was a wake-up call I didn't realize I needed. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.